the heart of Ghana, Elizabeth Akua Ohene's story begins. A tapestry woven with determination, intellect, and an unyielding passion for the truth. She is a trailblazing journalist and politician who has spent her life advocating for truth, justice, and press freedom. Some call her Daily and others call her Grandma. Born in Abutia Teti, near Ho in the Volta region of Ghana in 1945, Elizabeth was the first of 7 siblings. Her parents, Mr. Stephen Kwesi Ohene and Mrs. Augustine Atape Akosua Ohene, instilled in her the values of education and integrity.
I think growing up with my grandmother, who was a remarkable woman. This is my mother's mother, who was the only grandparent that I knew. And I grew up with her ages 5 to 9. And I was brought to come and start school with her in the village. My parents were teaching somewhere else. And she was just, well, mind you, this is a woman whose husband had died very early and left her with how many little children? She'd had 3 sets of twins. My mother and her brother, followed by 2 girls, followed by 2 boys. She'd had everything. And she had had to look after these people, these children by herself. She was a tough old cookie. They tried to marry her off, and she just said her husband had died and that was it. I think this woman, at the time, I don't think I ever thought that she had influenced me. But it's just the way she coped, the way she didn't let anything bring her down, the way she was always the person. I mean, let me tell you a story. I was in primary class 2. This is 1951, mind you. It had rained. We were not allowed really to wear shoes to school in the village. Yeah, we were not. But because it rained, my grandmother said I could wear shoes to school. So I wore shoes to school. I get to school and the teacher, the class 2 teacher, just took a cane at me and just started beating me and talking. And it took me a while to even realize why I was being beaten. And I was so upset because it was my grandmother who had said I should wear the shoes. Anyway, later on that day, she'd gone to the farm. There was an afternoon break. I would go to the house. She'd left food for me. And then when we finally closed at 4 and I went home, and she said, "Oh, so how was school today?" Which was a routine we went through. And then I suddenly remembered I had forgotten about the beating. So I broke out in tears all over again and narrated the story to her. She hugged me, said it was okay and everything. The next morning, I noticed the routine in the house had changed. Normally, when she's getting me ready to go to school, she's getting ready to go to the farm. But she wasn't getting ready to go to the farm. She came with me to school. And when we were having the assembly, she leaned in the veranda in front of our classroom. And when we entered the classroom, she entered the classroom and confronted the teacher and said, "You beat up my granddaughter yesterday. For what reason? And you were..." And she had a cane in her cloth. So you get the rest of the story. This is what my grandmother. I think she had a lot to do with the kind of person I became. My father was definitely a decisive factor in my life because he read all the time. In the house, that's all he did. He would. My mother was in charge of all the rules and the regulations. Don't do this. My father very rarely was called upon to say, hey, you can't do this or you can't do that. It was always my mother. But my father, he just introduced us to books, introduced me to books, and books were always there in our house. And I was reading all the time, and he was reading all the time. And he always wanted me to tell him what I had read. I think that was probably the most influential thing in deciding what to do.
My father was very, should I say, he was very interested, took a keen interest in politics, in affairs of state, in the way the country was run, the way institutions were run. You know, he had that interest.
Our father was an educationist, very strict in the house. He made allowances for youthful exuberance and things, but on the core principles and values, he was very strict on all of us. Every
day we had the newspapers. That time it was mainly Graphic and Times, but it was a daily, ritual that we would read the newspapers from front page to back page. And he also encouraged dialogue and debate. We would argue about things.
That's what motivated me, I think, to write. But the journalism bit, I think it's just that I am always wanting to know what happened. I don't know if I can point to any one person to say, this is the person. But when things were happening around me, the politics of Ghana, I was interested in what was happening around the world. We always needed to know about the news. In the house, we were always encouraged to gather around and find out about what's happening in the news and to recount it. So I think I just thought it was the most natural thing to do.
My sister was like a mother to me. My first memories of her, I think, was when we visited her in Legon. I can't remember everything, but that was the first memory I have of her. She was in university and my mother and I came to visit. That's my first memory. From then on, she's been like a mother figure to me.
We met at the Graphic Corporation. At that time, she was in the editorial department. I was in the advert department. And we just found out that her son and my son were first cousins. We didn't know, I didn't know. My son was a mold, and Elizabeth's son, Anofuswama, whose grandmother is a mold as well. So that is how we met. So it started off as colleagues, and then it became family connections, and we became sisters.
When I started in journalism in Ghana, it was almost all state media, state-owned things. As for radio and television, it was exclusively state-owned. Newspapers, every once in a while there would be a few. The main one being the Pioneer, the Ashanti Pioneer. at the time that I started. And then every once in a while there will be some, but it was state-owned, state-controlled. And that was where my first battles in journalism started, because some of us took the view it can be state-owned, but it need not be government-controlled.
Elizabeth, I recall we met at the Graphic. She was with the Sunday Mirror. That was in 1970. She was with the Sunday Mirror, and we joined the Graphic, the Daily Graphic. She was already there when we went in.
I've started work at the Graphic, and I think had I done a year or whatever, there was a Mirror too. I was on the Graphic then, and it was called the Sunday Mirror at the time. Mr. Nicolas Alando was the editor, and I was on the Graphic, and I took it into my mind that I would write a column for the Mirror, Sunday Mirror. And I wrote a draft column and took it to the editor. And he liked it. And between the two of us, we decided we'll call it Chat with Grandma.
And it was such a popular, witty weekly column. This is how she got the name Grandma. Everybody was calling her Grandma, Grandma, Grandma.
It became the beginning of something that lasted for years and years and years and years. A weekly column in the Mirror called Chat with Grandma. So I am 23 years old. I hadn't yet become a mother, and I became Grandma. And this became my name because chat with my friends, those who knew that I wrote the column, started calling me Grandma. So that was it. It became Grandma. It became my name before I became a mother, before I became a grandmother. So it gave me some kind of protection. You know when women are like about 40-something, 50, and somebody calls you Grandma, people get angry. But I'd been called Grandma proudly since I was 23, 24. So I think it was a good thing.
From the Sunday Mirror, she switched to the Graphic, the Daily Graphic, and also started a column there, Thinking Aloud, an irrepressible column which gave a lot of problems with the editor of the paper, rather.
So the 31st December coup d'etat took place. I took the view that the people of Ghana had elected President Liman. He had served 2 years and 4 months, I think, or a little more. I was not particularly a great admirer of President Liman, but he'd been elected and he was doing his job. He had a 4-year term, and my view was that it was up to the people of Ghana at the end of that 4 years to vote him out if they wanted. It was not up to anybody, soldier, whatever, because they have guns, to interrupt the session and say he's not doing well, he's corrupt, he's this, he's that, and therefore throw him out. And therefore, I made that clear. I wrote it. They were unhappy. The new authorities were unhappy. So a Sunday, a little group of people, maybe 12, 13 people came to the Graphic to demonstrate.
Mostly, not a big crowd. coming into the office one day to attack, jumping on her seat, on her desk, where is the editor, attacking the intellectual front of the graphic. Fortunately, Elizabeth wasn't there.
It was like Akua Ohene. I thought I had gotten away with opposing the revolution in '79, that they were not going to allow me to get away with opposing this government.
The editor became so paranoid with almost everything that she wrote. Then one day, she came in, her column had been taken out. The editor didn't stop there. Also did a query put on her desk. And Elizabeth came in, found the query, read it, and in the presence of the editor, tore it into pieces and threw them into a bin next to her, and said to the editor, "This is how much I think of your misunderstanding of press freedom." So that was, something.
Anyway, on the Monday when we came to work, I got a letter saying I should proceed on indefinite leave. I stayed the whole day, worked. In the evening, on my way to work, on my way home, I heard on the car radio that I should report to some place in Birmingham. And I decided I wouldn't report. And a few days later, I left. I left Ghana. When I was leaving, I genuinely thought I was leaving for like 2 months, 3 months. I did take my then, how old was he? 8-year-old son with me. But I really thought we were going for 3 months, 6 months. 19 years was how long I was gone for. 19 years.
The 31st December explosion created a situation in the graphic. I remember Kofi and I were, Kofi Akua Ohene and myself, Ben Mensah, we were the ones that were doing the editorials on behalf of the editor of the paper, Mr. George Edi. And so we were also invited to the Burma camp. And I remember our meeting with 2 officers who then came and said we should take over the editorship at the graphic, particularly me. And so I turned to Kofi and said, "Kofi, sorry I cannot take this position. You remember, we've always championed no government should be allowed to appoint editors. So I wasn't going to accept it. So what, you Kofi, what's your position?" And Kofi said, "Infante, abofun or enja emina maji," and something to that effect. So that ended it. And a new person was appointed, the editor of the graphic at the time. And we went through very bad times. So that's how we also organized ourselves and managed to live.
I grew up at her feet in the newsroom, watching stories being developed at the Daily Graphic. I followed this sort of impulse that she had for finding out what the story was, and it's followed me throughout. Her involvement in the public affairs of Ghana has driven essentially my own opinions about life. I'm interested. I'm a writer of sorts because of her, because I, like her, want to find out what the story is.
I have been working with Miss Ohene and Professor Fusuama for about 27 years now. Mommy, I called her Mommy, and she is an easygoing person. She accepted me and my son, and she's very interesting.
When I was 6 years old and I came to Ghana on vacation, just throughout the time I had questions about the country because at the time I wasn't as familiar with it. And one day she sat down to write an article for the BBC, and I had another question, which was, what are you writing about? And she was writing about me and my many questions, and she wrote a beautiful piece about all of my 6-year-old questions with the seriousness of an actual BBC reporter. And ever since then, I've just asked as many questions as possible and known that it's exactly what Auntie Lee would want me to do. And no question is a bad question.
When I was editing the graphic, we didn't bow to pressure from any side. And when I left the graphic and got to London with my two friends, Ben Mensah and Kofi Akumenyi, that we published Talking Drums for almost 3 years, and it is a paper that I am extremely proud of.
We succeeded immensely in annoying governments in West Africa in particular. We became like a rival paper to the West Africa magazine. People were more interested in Talking Drums than the West Africa magazine.
I met her in 1993. I think it was around April or March, because I remember it was at the tail end of winter. I'd just been transferred to London from the US. I was then working for Turner Broadcasting, and I was part of the team that had been sent over to start CNN International and Turner International. Now, with Madam Elizabeth, when we were at Prempeh College in Form 2, one of our English masters, the late Mr. Ntwije, said to us that if you wanted to write well, you needed to read Elizabeth Ohene. At that time, she was the editor for the Mirror. I think it was then called the Ghanaian Mirror. And every weekend, Mr. Ntwije would bring us, or Mondays, he would buy it on the weekends and bring it to us on Mondays, and would have to literally read her editorials and summarize it. And that was the way of Ntwije's English class.
The main motivation reading Madame Elizabeth Ohene's pieces has been my own love for literature generally, and sort of having developed reading habits very early on in my life.
So there was one particular friend, Randy Foucault, who arguably became one of the best writers of our generation. At Prempeh College, Randy was a very, very good writer. He would always say that it was because he used to read Elizabeth Ohene religiously. Even when we went home, he would buy the Mirror or buy the Graphic, read it, and do his summaries. So when I came to London, I went to a party, and I remember it was my first weekend in London. I went to a party with a friend, and I saw this lady. I mean, I think Madam Elizabeth must have been in her late 50s or early 60s at that time. And, you know, it was a very animated conversation. It was not too far from our table. So I said to my friend, but who is this lady who is trying to win this argument at all costs? And he says, oh, you don't know her? And I said, no. He said, that is Elizabeth Ohene. I said, Elizabeth Ohene of Ghanaian Mirror. He said, yes. I said, oh, wow. We used to read her editorials in school. So I went over and I introduced myself.
We were in no doubt about how well she led us. In the talking drums, we had to deal with certain politicians who had also come into exile. We met with Umaru Diko. Elizabeth had arranged for an interview with Umaru Diko one morning, and she went direct to the rendezvous. We waited for Elizabeth to come back to the office for a long time. She wasn't coming. Apparently, she had also waited for Umar Diko, who wasn't showing up for the interview. So, with quick thinking, the Scotland Yard had to be alerted. So when it happened, Umar Diko had a secretary called Lisbeth at the time. And everybody was talking about Lisbeth, thinking it was this secretary of that had done this very crucial thing. The Scotland Yard quickly traced Umar Diko to a cage at Stansted Airport. And it was our Elizabeth, not the other Elizabeth.
My recollection was that she was traveling in and out of South Africa a lot because Mandela had been released. South Africa was on the path to independence, and she was one of the key journalists. So we started reading Elizabeth Ohene again because apart from her daily, I think it was 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. on the BBC, Focus Africa, reporting from South Africa, she also used to write a lot, and the BBC had a magazine called Focus Africa. And again, Randy said we should start subscribing to Focus Africa because of Elizabeth Ohene. So I started following her again. Then I was also sent to South Africa. I was then head of CNN Africa. I wasn't on the journalistic side. I was on the business and commercial side. And I was responsible for all our resource mobilization, determining who went in and who came out. So when I was sent to South Africa to start our preparations for the elections, who could I fall on but Madame Elizabeth Ohene? We had this idea of starting an African Journalist Awards, but then we realized that if we only used our reporters from CNN, it would become like a CNN thing, and wanted to make it African. So again, who could I fall on? I went to Elizabeth Ohene and I said, look, I want to start a CNN African Journalist Awards, and I want to have a senior journalist from BBC, Reuters, Associated Press, and some of our competitors, which was really unheard of in those days, to work with your competitor. Elizabeth was a constant fixture of the CNN Awards, and I must thank her very much because none of our judges got paid. You know, they all did it for love and continent, and she was one of our key judges. In fact, we used to, every year we had 7 or 8, 9 judges. We always had an odd number, but we'd take one out and bring in a new one. I must say Elizabeth was the only one who stayed with us throughout until she was appointed as a minister by President Kufuor. Then she opted out. But by that time, the event had grown and assumed a life of its own.
With the BBC, I probably am proud of the fact that I made them realize that the continent they were reporting on was a continent of where people led everyday lives and took decisions, and what a 30-minute program is not what was fashioning the reality of their lives. That it was important to realize that the Africa that we were reporting on, with all its problems, with all its coups d'etats those days and wars and such, was a continent of ordinary human beings trying to lead ordinary lives and sorting out their ordinary problems. That, for me, was a pleasure.
We enjoyed very cordial relationship, and the relationship had begun before I became president. Of course, she had attained national honor stage, having been editor of Graphic in her time, and expressing very bold and objective views, even to power. Didn't seem afraid to tell her mind. And then even when she had to go into exile, living in London, working with BBC and all that, I believe she increased her strong image as an objective, if you like, commentator on affairs of politics, of state, and affecting humans generally. So when time came for me to go into power, she and the late Jacob Chebilamte and Oboshi Sai, who is still around, they came together to back me to manage my public relations and also my efforts in campaigning.
It was in 1999, 2000, during the first campaign for President Kufuor. We had a lot of political meetings at my dad and mom's house, and she used to come there with Professor Ofosu-Amah for political meetings. And I think that's where we really started forging a bond of friendship. She was a very interesting person, very articulate, very, very masterful command of the English language. And this is a person who had a great personality, but also had intelligence, had a great memory, had wit, and had the ability to string words together in a way that nobody else could. So I found her a fascinating person, and we drew together from that time.
And when we won and I came to be president, naturally she became like an establishment person in my corner, sometimes in the, if you like, back room, other times up front with the Ministry of Information and the general communication with the media. And in all this, I found her to be very, very loyal to my cause, but at the same time, very candid to me on how she saw me interacting with the general public in the expression of opinions on issues. So I valued her advice very much.
In both administrations, one of the most difficult things was putting together the president's speeches. Elizabeth took center stage in that, and it was no easy task, either in President Kufuor's regime or under President Nana Akufo-Addo. A lot of hard work,
research work, making sure you got the words right, making sure the president you were serving for was comfortable with the words you were trying to feed him. Because these were very intelligent presidents. These were people who knew themselves. Both of them would say they were better speechwriters than you sitting there, so please, take your time. So it was a mix of doing the work and managing the principal and making sure that at the end of the day you had a beautiful, well-rounded speech that said the things that he wanted to say in his own words. Very hard work. People don't appreciate how hard it is, but that was where Elizabeth shone, and she took center stage in that all the time.
The first law my government repealed was the criminal libel law, which had been in the works for as far back as before we got anywhere near the presidency. And to amend that law or repeal that law, naturally Elizabeth was quite one of the captains or champions leading to remove that law quickly from the statute books. And that to me was very significant, because it was from there we allowed the media the freedom, which led to the establishment of FM stations, so many of them, and then the press media too mushroomed all over.
And she was very, very powerful when it comes to speaking one's mind. Under President Kufuor, we were coming out of what we had called a culture of silence. It wasn't really the thing. It wasn't the right thing to do, to be seen to be speaking out against your president, your vice president, or bigger people than you in the political divide. But Elizabeth would speak, and she would bang her hand on the table and say, no, no, 1,000 times no. That cannot be. And everybody else would be so shocked. It's like, what is she doing? And people would call her aside, I can name names, but I won't, and say, you can't talk to the president like that. And she would say, why not? He needs to know these things. I think we've lost a lot of the ability to do that over the years, and we've all shrunk away from actually, as they say, cliched as it may be, speaking truth to power, or saying the things that the person in power doesn't really want to hear, and fighting for them to listen and do what you are trying to tell them to.
One clear recent example, I asked her to arrange a meeting for me with the Minister of Environment. Yeah. And when I went, he was very busy, but he said to the people they should excuse because she is the most principled person that he knows, and if she's asked that he talk to me, then he has to talk to me. He then proceeded to tell me that in cabinet and other meetings, she is the first person to say things as they are, not scared of anybody.
Even if we try to do anything that would be contrary to the value systems we believed in or we profess to believe in, this lady wouldn't support us in that direction. She kept reminding, she became like a bit of our conscience.
We seem to have lost that, and Elizabeth was a champion of that. She remains a champion of that to this day. President Akua Ohene didn't have it easy with her. She would tell him any time when she thought he was wrong, and tell him in no uncertain words.
I've been traveled with her sometime to her village. Met the young chief that they had installed then, a chief who has become like a friend. Met her family, Elizabeth's family, and she also met mine. So she became like part of my family. And the relationship has continued till now, even as we speak. I call her Akua, and she will giggle a bit.
That is like Abutia person. If I say Abutia person, it's like not specifically from Teti to her, it's from Abutia, and Abutia is more than 25 communities. So she has done a lot. So I could remember the first time we saw a bitumen on our road from Sokode to the third town, that is Kule. It's when former President Kufuor was in power for the first time, when she was appointed Minister of State in charge of tertiary education. Yeah, so that is one. And numerous school buildings. I could even remember during opposition time, she was able to lobby Coca-Cola Foundation to come and build a computer lab for our basic school. And also all the school buildings that we can see from going to her house, her residence, that is a basic school, that is EP, primary and then junior high schools. Most of them are from lobby. So like, even right now as we are speaking, the new kindergarten for Abutiatiti, I'm here to see such a public school kindergarten in the Volta region. And also right now when you go to the senior high school, you'll see lab, that is for chemistry, physics and biology lab. It's at almost 90-something% complete. It's by her efforts. And even the traditional council that we have finally been given about some 4 or 5 years ago, it was through her instrumentality and support for rule of law and traditions of Abutia.
What I normally do is I stand away a little bit far so that I'll be watching things. And normally we don't go alone. We went there with other policemen. So we do things together. Personally, I always cover her.
She has inspired people. She has been a great example. Her exploits at BBC, her exploits in South Africa, all right, every one of them, and adding to her role in politics. I mean, to date, I don't know which MPP man does not really admire for the middle generation and even the senior generation really respects that early. I can't find one.
Well, outside of work, one of the interesting paradoxes, she's a synthesis of some very different facets, almost opposing or polarized facets. For example, this is a person who would, you'll be in church, I'd be sitting by her in church, and she sings like an angel, like an angel. She has a beautiful voice, and she knows all the words to all the hymns. I used to just be in awe of her. And yet at a party, she dances like nobody's business. She can dance and dance and dance and not stop dancing. And for her age, you would think she gets tired. She can dance, Papa.
I had just completed university in 2004, and then I'd been posted to the Ministry of Education as a service personnel, and I struck this very good acquaintance with Ms. Ohene, who's the Minister of State at the Ministry of Education. Anteli has a great sense of fashion, and then the way, if you know her kente game, as we young people say, kente game is strong. She knows how to rock her kente, bring it to light at every opportunity. One moment I can remember is when she received the state award at the Order of the Volta. She wore this amazing red kente, like she blew me out. It was out of this world. And she comes in the simplest form, but it's the most amazing appearance. And her sense of style is amazing. So she's a fashion person. She's a fashionista, as people would say behind. But she always rocks her kente very well.
Dahali's signature, I think it was already established by Kofi Ansan and Joyce Mills. And so I only built on that with obviously some youthful flair, which she enjoys. And she knows how to carry like everything and anything, so long as it fits her body so perfectly. Even though she likes simplicity and all of that stuff, like she rocks her thing so well. One thing I would remember would be the kente that she wore to the Independence Day celebration in 2020 in Kumasi. And I would say that because of the circumstances under which we made that kente happen, and also when she came back from the celebration, she told me the following day that the kente was a hit, and that even the president requested that she brings me to start making things for his wife.
Well, I'm glad you've asked that question, because I think actually it was one of the worst moments of Elizabeth's political life, when she realized that people actually thought she had plagiarized or inserted a quote with no credit into the President Akufo-Addo's inaugural speech. She was shattered. She was so upset. And it was not done by her. But however, a lot of people went out thinking that that was her work and that was something she had done. But it was somebody else who had made that unfortunate error. She lived with that pain for a long time, because it's not the kind of thing that you can go out in the public and say, well, it wasn't me and it was so and so. And I think it's been one of the things that depressed her, made her unhappy during her political life. However, we snapped out of it, and work went on, life went on, and I think there have been many, many fantastic speeches after that, and she shouldn't worry about it.
A lot of our history has been lost in narration. People have lived it. She has lived it. My only regret, as of now, but it's a regret that can be corrected, is that she has failed to catalog that in a proper book. We still have that fight going on. We won't stop. I think to be the biggest travesty to society, for you to be blessed with so much knowledge, catalog, and influence, and just share with us over the dining table. It's not acceptable, Daddy. You have to fix this.
There's so much I can say. That she's such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. Senghor, President Senghor, when he was it 65 or so, had a chair made and sat down and told the friends, whatever you want to write in my obituary, come and tell me now that I'm alive, so I can listen to it, instead of writing it when I'm dead. So this is opportunity for me to tell that she's such a wonderful person, and she thinks about everybody. You know, you just have to tell her your problem. She will think about it and probably go step by step and analyze the problem and see where you can solve it. You cannot get such a person in Ghana here when she's giving you answers with no exchange of money. Where? She's such a wonderful person. I mean, I always boast that her mother gave me a citizenship to Abutia, so I'm part of Abutia citizens.
I want to wish Elizabeth a very happy birthday and many more wishes, good health. I do not want her to sober down. She should be the same fighter she has always been. She should maintain and keep her principles as an individual. And I wish that we grow old together and have more years, more happy years together.
So I do wish her well. I wish that she has more years, but then those years should be healthy so that she can be strong and continue doing what she does best.
I wouldn't like to eulogize her virtues and things like that, but I have 4 words now. We are Avis. I have 4 words in the Ewe language which I would like to use to explain her and my opinion of her. In Ewe, we say the amagwetopumea. which is the human family. And then Amagweta, which is human being. And a woman in Ebe is Nyonu, which those who know Ebe means the one who refines, Nyonu. And then Dada, which is a mother in Ebe, means reduplicator of life. And then a Tovi Nyonu, which is a female sibling on the father's side, Novi Nyonu, a female sibling on the mother's side. She was all of this to me. Dada, Novi Nyonu, Novi Uchu, Nyonu. And to finally close it, there's a proverb in the Ewa, she's human. She has a fault like everybody else, but she's human and she's empathetic. And one comment which I never knew about, but a friend of ours made is that even if you kill a human being and you tell her, your secret is safe with her. So, Ewa was our intermarriage. She's human.
People defer to her because of the depth of her wisdom, the depth of her knowledge of events and times. You can't take that from her.
I'm her senior, at least in age, by far. So I still see her not so much as a 80-year-old. She's quite healthy, strong. She's able to go and come. The mind is still as sharp as a razor. And sometimes I tend to even feel a bit nervous for her, for the way she can express her opinions in candor, without fear. So she's blessed. 80 years with mind working like that. Many a place she might be considered senile, but not Lisbeth. She's still alert and active and strong. And so I say, everything being normal, and I believe in God. With God on her side, I wouldn't be surprised if she continues plodding on through 90, through 100. That's my wish for her.
On behalf of chiefs and people of Abutia, that we are proud that she's a true daughter of Abutia.
Thank you, Elizabeth Ohene. You have been a wonderful, wonderful friend, an excellent colleague. You have guided us through all kinds of situations in our political career. You have been a shining star to STRATCOM, the Strategic Communications Unit, which we set up and which worked under both presidencies. It's needed somebody like you to tell us when we're veering off the right path, and you did that perfectly. On behalf of the NPP party, STRATCOM, and all our colleagues.
She is like a big sister to me. And I would say that this has been reinforced by my association with her brothers in the university. Emmanuel, I can probably mention the names. Emmanuel, who was my senior in law school, and also Sami, the medical professional, or the professor of medicine. So I would just want to use this opportunity to wish her the very best.
Dali, thank you for teaching me all about believing in yourself, standing up for what you believe in, even if you are the only one. You survived EO Must Die in the late 70s and early 80s. You survived all the humiliation and abuse in all the positions you've held, but at each stage in your life, you have maintained your integrity, and that is what I'm most proud of, and very glad to be your little sister.
Auntie Ellie, I remember when I was 7 and I asked you how old you were, you said 100. So I feel lied to, but happy birthday, and I hope you enjoy the day, and I can't wait to party with you.
Mom, I love you. I wish you 80 more years. I wish I could be arguing with you every day. I don't think I get to do as much as I should and as I perhaps need, but I'm always comforted that your voice is echoing in my ear and guiding me.
You know, I wrote a piece. What's it called? For Miss Ohene, and I sent it to my friend Randy, who really I hadn't seen in a very, very long time. But since I mentioned his name in my article, I decided to send it to him. So I would like to read what he said, and he's not somebody I've seen in a very, very long time. And he said, Massa, I've only just seen this. Thank you very much for forwarding it. I'm absolutely thrilled to learn Elizabeth Ohene is still alive and kicking. At least one beacon of hope and wholesomeness in a world of nutters, shysters, and the downright profane. Good morning. I think when somebody describes you as one beacon of hope and wholesomeness in all these difficulties that I think that's a good testament. I don't think anybody could have said it better than what Randy said.
Is married to Professor G.K.A. of Usuama, a legal luminary, and has children and grandchildren.